If you knew absolutely nothing about the United States, except the name, United States, you'd know at least two things. One, that we're united, and two, we have states. But what if half of that was just a bad idea?
The concept of a state is outdated in my opinion.
I think that states are really important in a giant country like this.
I would have the municipal government be the only governmental level between the local and the federal level.
We don't need hurricane laws, but Florida, they need that.
I think we should have states because without states, we wouldn't have the Minnesota State Fair. And everybody loves the fair.
Today, we are here at the Phipps Center for the Arts in Hudson, Wisconsin, and behind me is the state borderline between Minnesota and Wisconsin. When the Constitution went into effect in 1789, it included a process for creating new states beyond the original 13 on the East Coast. It basically goes like this. Carve out a chunk of land and call it a territory. Form a territorial government, submit a letter of intent, write a state constitution, elect a state government, get the federal government to say, okay, congratulations, update your LinkedIn, you're a state.
And that process is still on the table, right? So Puerto Rico, for instance, could become a state if the Puerto Rican citizens decided to become a state, drafted a constitution, and I think the big sticking block would be Congress would have to accept Puerto Rico as a state. And the same true of any of the American territories right now.
This process was heavily influenced by the Land Ordinance of 1784 and the 1787 Northwest Ordinance, and relied on a pretty crude understanding of our geography. At the same time, the admission to the Union Clause clearly stated you can't bite off a piece of an existing state to create a new one, unless both states agree and Congress consents. And as a result, you get a lot of states that simply wrap around those that came before them. Repeat this process enough times, and you get the 50-nifty United States we print on sweatshirts, collect as refrigerator magnets, and tattoo on our arms. But does this make sense?
The state lines themselves are fairly arbitrary. Some of them have something that resembles a historical rationale to them. A lot of them don't. There's no reason why there needs to be a North Dakota and a South Dakota. There was a logic that was both political and economic at the time, but these are two states that really could have been formed as one state at the time. So there's nothing about the lines of the states that is anything other than arbitrary.
Today, our country's system for distributing federal money is almost completely controlled by the shape of our states. And this can lead to some really illogical situations. Take Fargo-Moorhead on the Minnesota-North Dakota border. It's essentially one big city, but because it just so happens to straddle an arbitrary geographic border created over 150 years ago, the city is dependent on two different state capitals for federal aid. And these capitals are rarely pursuing the same agenda. Border cities like these are everywhere in America. And even though they work, shop, sleep, eat, pray, and love together, legislatively, they are cut in half. So what if instead we just let them do what they're already doing and connect? So first off, how did you come to the idea that we need to redraw our map to account for how we actually function socially?
Right. Well, I mean, there is a whole school of thought called functional geography, that we're not really 50 states, but more like 40 urban clusters. So really, instead of if you were to redraw, the 50 U.S. states today, you would basically just draw these 40 urban hubs, and each of them would have what I call a sphere of responsibility.
As Parag Khanna put it in the New York Times, economically and socially, the country is drifting toward looser metropolitan and regional formations, anchored by the great cities and urban archipelagos that already lead global economic circuits.
The more I researched, I saw just how awful the state of connectivity is, because we've let the infrastructure decay over the last sort of generation or two. So this is just sort of, various data and observations that all fed into generating this map.
The way that the states are set up, are they built more on territory or connectivity?
They're built more on territory, and they're really built more as a function of history. The reason that we have Pennsylvania is not because somebody sat down and said, what's the most effective way of connecting a particular territory? The reason we have Pennsylvania is because of the charter that was given to William Penn.
In Mr. Khanna's model, states are largely irrelevant. What our country really looks like is this. It's a map where we're living in gooey blobs of interconnectedness. Blobs that flow between cities, along highways and transportation routes, and frankly, don't care much about the Land Ordinance of 1784. Overall, a map like this isn't just some attack on the souvenir magnet industry. It's an idea that can make our system work more like we say we want it to work. It's actually an idea that's gaining steam globally.
Much like everywhere else in the world, we're urbanizing. We're not urbanizing as fast as other countries, but we're certainly urbanizing.
Many other countries, including Britain, Italy, and China, are adopting financial distribution systems based on maps like this. As Mr. Khanna puts it, we don't need to create these regions, they already exist. In short, they are real, we just don't call them anything.
When you build a road across the country, it doesn't really stop at the random rectangular borders of Colorado. But the way we fund these things is very often dictated by these district or state level interests that actually have absolutely no relationship whatsoever. So again, how people live, where people live, how they move, where they move, why they go places, which urban economies are connected to.
Okay, time for the main question. If we were making America from scratch today, would we even have states? What should we actually do with the concept of states, and should we get rid of them completely?
The short answer is yes. State boundaries tell you almost nothing about those things. If anything, they're a huge obstacle. They get in the way, they waste money, they add a layer of authority, and they distort decision making. And one of the things I point out is that, back when we made America great, which was basically the 20th century, all of the mega projects, the Tennessee Valley Authority, the interstate highway system, the Pacific Railways, Social Security Administration, everything, whether it's bureaucratic or infrastructural, all of those things were regional and national in nature. It was irrelevant what the state boundaries were. The whole point was to connect America together.
Now, not every expert agrees that we should get rid of states.
The basic answer of why we should care about states is because they do a lot, or at least they are responsible for a lot. They are one of the most effective ways in which you can be engaged in politics, one of the most effective ways in which you can make change in politics, especially when things at the national level are paralyzed. And they are just responsible for an enormous amount of sort of people's daily lives, from Medicaid to labor law to minimum wage. A lot is done by the states.
Now, to be fair, the United States of America sounds a lot better than the United Regions of Shared Economic and Cultural Influence. And we get it. We love states, they're our identity. But when we base our policies on historical territorial regions that were in turn based on maps that look like this, well, it's easy to see why there might be a better way of getting things done. I'll ask it anyways. Do you believe the country is ready for an idea like this? And if so, how long would it take for the U.S. to acclimate to your model?
Well, we can't even amend the Constitution, so we're not ready for a model like this. Inertia is the lack of political will to change things because things are the way they are, and that's the way they've been. And, it's broke, so don't fix it kind of thing. And that is very, very corrosive, but it's very common. The way I operate is if you were to start from scratch, how would you design the physical, administrative geography of the country?
Which brings us back to here, the Phipps Center. So what do you think? When we look out this window, should we really be looking at the border of two states? Or should we just call it a river? Hey everybody, this is Toussaint Morrison, and in our next episode, we're going to discuss if we made America from scratch today, would Congress need a gender quota? Submit your opinion to the link in the description, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.